Oh, what a headache.
What's the matter? You need some aspirin? That would alleviate the pounding in your head.
True, aspirin would ease the pain of my headache.
In fact, aspirin alleviates a lot of pain. Aspirin alleviates muscle aches. Aspirin alleviates toothaches. Aspirin alleviates...
I take it alleviate is the first word of our next group, make things better. It's pretty easy to remember, too. If something alleviates pain, it makes it leave.
Good one. And only a wonder drug like aspirin alleviates pain, regrows lost hair, improves personal hygiene, and makes you more interesting at parties.
I think a few of those claims may not be substantiated.
Oh, come on, you don't need to support everything you hear with proof or evidence. Every single little claim doesn't have to be substantiated, as long as you really believe it will work for you.
Yeah, right. Substantiate, as you've guessed from Jack's flight of fancy, means to prove with evidence or to verify. Because Edna couldn't substantiate her claim that the neighbor's children were responsible for the disappearance of her pecan pie, the crime remained unsolved.
Poor Edna. But just because she couldn't prove that those little demons stole the pie, that doesn't necessarily exculpate the neighbor's children.
No, it doesn't necessarily free them from guilt or blame. There are a few clues in the word exculpate to help you remember its meaning.
Ex means out of or away from, as in exit, to go out.
And think of the word culprit, meaning the person who is guilty of something. That root comes up in words like culpable, meaning guilty, and culpability, meaning guilt.
So, exculpate, to put out of or away from guilt.
There was at least one mitigating factor. The culprits made off with the pecan pie, but they didn't touch the lemon meringue.
That's right. To mitigate means to make less severe or painful. The fact that she could still enjoy the lemon meringue no doubt mitigated the loss Edna felt over the pecan pie. But still, I really can't sanction the stealing of pies.
Me neither. I can't give official authorization or approval to such a crime.
Sanction means just that, to give official authorization or approval to some act.
Because Mrs. Whiteley didn't step in and force her third graders to stop taunting the new kid, it was generally assumed that she sanctioned their abuse.
Kids can be so cruel sometimes.
Oh, have you been hurt by children?
Not recently. But it's amazing that the same children who look so benign when they're sleeping can be so horrible when they're awake.
Everyone looks benign when they're sleeping. Eyes shut, quietly curled into a fetal position, we all look kind, gentle, and harmless. It's when we're awake that you have to watch out.
You're a severe judge of human nature.
I think I just need a vacation. I need to get away from it all. I need to find a place where I can retreat and be secure. I need...
An asylum?
I beg your pardon. I do not need an insane asylum.
I didn't say an insane asylum. I just said an asylum. An asylum is simply a place of retreat or security.
Oh, right, like political asylum.
Yeah. When a person or a group is seeking political asylum, they're seeking security from the persecution they've experienced elsewhere.
So if I need to find a nice quiet spot by the side of a babbling brook, that could be considered an asylum from the hectic world?
And that babbling just might serve as an emollient to the ceaseless noise of the modern world.
An emollient is something that softens and soothes. The babbling of a lovely brook in a serene place could very well serve as an emollient to the less pleasant noises we usually hear around us.
Let's talk some Latin again here. Anytime you hear moll in a word, it's probably got something to do with softness, as in our next word, mollify, to calm, to soothe, to soften or appease, as in someone's temper.
Mollify is close in meaning to mitigate, which we've already seen.
Despite my desperate attempts to make him stop crying, my baby nephew could only be mollified in his mother's arms.
How about mollusk? Clams and the like have pretty hard shells. That blows your theory.
Ah, but you speak too soon. Haven't you ever eaten a clam on the half-shell? Mucus, phlegm, living, slipping, sliding, snot. We're talking soft once you've dispensed with those shells.
Thanks for the image. We're not even halfway through our WordSmart hit parade words, and you've already been disgusting. This doesn't bode well for an auspicious second half.
Aha, by auspicious you mean attended by favorable circumstances.
Any possibility for an auspicious start to the McPherson's vacation was ruined when their car broke down before even reaching the interstate.
Auspicious, promising a favorable outcome.
And that's the end of this group. Let's review them.
Okay, first was alleviate.
When the stadium ran out of beer and hot dogs, only an oversized foam novelty hat could alleviate Joe's pain.
Alleviate means to ease a pain or a burden. Next up is asylum.
Several members of the Slovakia Olympic synchronized swimming team sought asylum in the Netherlands, where they hoped they would not be persecuted for their art.
Slovakia, huh? Anyway, asylum means a place of retreat or security, and it's starting to sound like you need one.
Never you mind. Next word.
The next word is auspicious.
Sasha's hopes for an auspicious beginning to his career as a reporter were dashed when he found out that he actually been hired for the mailroom.
Auspicious means attended by favorable circumstances. Next is benign.
Principal Merriweather smiled benignly even as he sentenced Pete and Dan to 2 months' detention.
Benign means kind and gentle. The next word is emollient.
Doris believed that a well-chosen greeting card could serve as an emollient to any sorrow.
An emollient is something that softens and soothes, just like a well-chosen greeting card should. Our next hit parader is mitigate.
When a bus full of supermodels unexpectedly broke down in their neighborhood, the tensions between the two gangs were somewhat mitigated.
To mitigate means to make something less severe or painful, just as supermodels should. Next up is mollify.
Rebecca was mollified and stopped screaming only when her parents found her doll behind the couch.
Mollify means to calm or soothe. Sanction.
The Parkers feel strongly that buying products unnecessarily tested on animals sanctions a barbaric practice.
To sanction means to give authorization or approval to something, usually in an official way. Next is substantiate.
Billy wasn't satisfied by his father's assertion that no monsters lived in the closet until he substantiated the claims by opening the door, turning on the light, and exposing all the dark corners.
To substantiate means to support with proof or evidence. Exculpate.
The fairy princess Diana Dewdrops tried to exculpate herself by demonstrating that the moonbeam tiara found at the scene of the horrible crime didn't even fit her.
To exculpate means to free from guilt or blame. I'm glad we finished that group.
Why? It wasn't so bad.
Now I can recite my new limerick.
Oh, boy.
There once was an ad that was spurious, from an agency at best disingenuous. The ad claimed you could lose 20 pounds while you snooze by taking a pill that was in fact deleterious.
Wow. I guess that's one way to introduce our next group. Yeah, right.
This group is all about lies, liars, and other such stuff. What better introduction than a limerick about an ad agency?
Let's pick that one apart. There once was an ad that was spurious.
Spurious means not genuine or false, so the ad in question was basically a big ol' lie.
From an agency at best disingenuous.
Disingenuous means not straightforward or crafty.
A fitting adjective for ad agencies, or politicians, or used car salesmen.
Used car sales people. Let's not be sexist on top of prejudicial.
The disingenuous tenants in 9G kept asking about the health of the poor old widow in 3C. All they were interested in was her apartment.
Can we get back to my limerick?
Oh, right. You then went on about a claim that a person could lose weight while they slept.
Right. The ad claimed you could lose 20 pounds while you snooze by taking a pill that was in fact deleterious.
There's the catch. The pill you were supposed to take to make you lose weight while you slept was in fact harmful.
Deleterious means injurious or having a harmful effect. It is widely accepted that too much of a good thing can be deleterious.
Well, the claims made by the ad in your limerick don't seem to be too difficult to debunk.
Debunk means to expose the falseness of something, and no, I guess those claims wouldn't be too difficult to debunk.
Jenny derived great pleasure from debunking the various conspiracy theories her younger brother was constantly hatching.
Well, some of the conspiracy theories you hear are so obviously fabricated out of myths and half-truths you can't help but debunk them.
To fabricate means to make, but usually make in the sense of concoct.
You fabricate a story, a tale, a yarn.
Ooh, fabricate a yarn. Yarn is made of cotton. Cotton makes fabrics. Fabricate.
As in, fabricate a crazy mnemonic to help you remember fabricate. That mind just never stops, does it? But once again, whatever works for you.
Thank you. These mnemonics are the result of a hard and calculated effort on my part. I just don't blurt them out capriciously, you know.
Oh, you don't, do you? You don't just blurt them out impulsively or unpredictably? They seem pretty capricious from where I'm sitting.
Capricious means impulsive, unpredictable, on a whim. My grandmother only proved her reputation for capricious shopping when she left to buy a quart of milk but returned with a Harley-Davidson.
I'll say, is your grandmother very recalcitrant?
No, not really. She isn't defiant of authority, stubborn, or not easily managed.
Well, Granny on a Harley paints a pretty recalcitrant picture for me. I can see her blowing red lights, cutting off SUVs, flipping the bird to state troopers.
Well, if she did any of that, she'd certainly be recalcitrant. But since she doesn't do any of that, she's not recalcitrant. And besides, those are some nasty stereotypes of Harley riders. They're not all outlaws.
They're not.
No. Some are doctors, lawyers, teachers, computer technicians.
Dolphin trainers, chiropractors, exotic dancers.
Right. Harley riders are a pretty disparate bunch.
Disparate means fundamentally distinct or different.
The Riveras have such disparate taste in music that their 4-hour car ride could only be painful.
Well, no matter how disparate a bunch of Harley riders are, they all seem to take pleasure in revving their engines to make about 9,000 times more noise than even remotely necessary. What's that all about?
I'll ask my grandmother. But for now, let's review the words from Yeah, Right. The first one was debunk.
The theory that Christopher Columbus discovered America has been debunked.
Next is deleterious.
Smoking has many deleterious effects on a person's health.
Deleterious means harmful or injurious. Now let's try disingenuous.
Because Richard is known to be disingenuous, Sarah wondered what secret agenda he had when he sent her chocolates.
Disingenuous means not straightforward, crafty or shady. Next, disparate.
The members of the school newspaper had such disparate views about its content that they ended up printing nothing at all.
Disparate means fundamentally distinct or different. Moving right along, we have fabricated.
When forced to account for the missing milk money, Jason fabricated a story about a thieving band of hall monitors.
To fabricate means to make or to concoct in order to deceive. To tell a big old lie, in other words. Next up is recalcitrant.
Even as a kindergartner, Philip was recalcitrant. He never colored in between the lines, and he insisted on running laps around his classmates during nap time.
Recalcitrant means defiant of authority, stubborn, or not easily managed. Spurious is next on our list.
The mayor's most recent spurious claim was that he had negotiated with a secret interplanetary invasion force and had thereby saved the whole city from terrible destruction.
Spurious means not genuine or false. Last in Yeah, Right was capricious.
My aunt's capricious decorating style was highlighted when, for Thanksgiving dinner, we discovered that we would be dining on inflatable leopard skin furniture.
Capricious means impulsive and unpredictable.
And that brings us to the end of Yeah, Right.
You know, Jack, if I were a Harley rider, I'd be insulted by all of the anti-Harley comments you made not too long ago.
What? Would you sue me for slander?
Well, I guess what you suggested may be interpreted as false charges and malicious statements or reports. You should be careful what you say.
And that, folks, is the name of our next group. Be careful what you say. Slander is something you should avoid.
Being slanderous means making false and malicious statements about someone.
Count Dracula sued the local newspaper for slander when it printed an article suggesting that he was behind the robbery at the blood bank.
So he wasn't behind it?
No, it was actually the mummy.
But the newspaper's suggestion that Count Dracula was responsible was a specious claim.
Specious means having the ring of truth or plausibility, but actually false.
It was a specious claim, given Dracula's appetite for blood. That explanation had the ring of truth, but since the mummy was actually responsible, it was false.
When his friends chided him that the stories of his supermodel girlfriend were lies, Richard provided the most specious explanation he could think of. He said that she lived in Canada, and they had met at summer camp.
Not very specious at all. Sort of a hackneyed ruse, I'd say.
Hackneyed, don't forget, means overused and overly familiar. And a ruse is a crafty trick. So, not the best choice if the ruse is to be effective.
Not a very compelling ruse, either.
You're just recycling all the oldies, aren't you?
What better ruse to keep our listeners from forgetting what they already listened to?
True. It would be egregiously negligent of us to let that happen.
Since by egregious you mean conspicuously bad or offensive, I'd have to agree.
You'll often hear the word egregious used to describe an error. My brother Bill, the pilot, made an egregious error in trying to land without lowering the landing gear.
Ouch. It doesn't get much more egregious than that.
No, I guess it doesn't. And boy, do I like to tell that story.
Really? Like where?
Well, when Bill made me best man at his wedding, I made it part of the toast.
Now, Jack, I think you have to admit that telling that story at your brother's wedding shows that you lack a sense of propriety.
Propriety? Appropriateness of behavior? Me, a lack thereof?
Yes, you, a lack thereof. It wasn't exactly in good taste to bring up such a colossal failure on such an important day. That wasn't very decorous of you.
I suppose it wasn't. Maybe I'll curtail my telling of that particular story in the future.
Good idea.
Gee, I hope Bill forgives me for wishing him and his new bride all the success he had enjoyed in his flying career.
That was not your toast.
It was, but I was only being facetious.
Facetious. That was hardly playfully humorous.
Facetious is kind of like sarcastic, but a little more playful.
And your toast was neither. It was in egregiously poor taste.
Let me deflect your rebuke with an example of facetiousness. For the past 20 years of their marriage, Uncle Mort and Aunt Sarah have been playing a facetious game where they call each other horrible names and threaten to leave forever.
That's facetious?
Well, maybe. At least, that's what my parents always told me when this game flared up during Thanksgiving dinner.
Let's not discuss your family anymore. I believe pander is the last word in this group, is it not?
Yes, it is. And it reminds me of my cousin Stu, who ran for city council in Seattle.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it was during the grunge thing, so he learned to play guitar, let his hair grow, started wearing a lot of flannel, and began to bathe with great infrequency.
Now, Jack, remember what we said about slander?
His opponents said that he was just pandering to a certain element among the voters.
To pander means to cater to the lower tastes and desires of others, or to exploit their weaknesses, and wasn't he?
Well, if he was pandering to a group of people who either didn't fall for it or didn't vote.
I guess he lost.
With flying colors. But he got signed onto a great label. He's on tour right now.
Well, good for him then.
And good for us, because we've just wrapped up Be Careful What You Say. Let's review. Specious.
The claim that the diet pills control secretions from the hypoapostatic gland were specious, because there's no such thing as a hypoapostatic gland.
Specious means having the ring of truth or plausibility, but being in fact false. Next hit parader is slander.
The actor sued the tabloid for slander after it printed a story about a lurid affair he'd had with a member of a traveling carnival.
To slander someone is to make false charges and malicious statements or reports about that person. I guess it's only slander in this case if you've got something against bearded ladies.
Jack, could we move along here? What's the next word?
It's ruse.
Children across the country fall for the ruse that if they don't behave and go to bed early, Santa Claus will leave nothing but coal.
A ruse is a crafty trick. Next, egregious.
When he accidentally sewed his own hand into a patient's chest cavity, Dr. Mike, the discount surgeon, made an egregious error.
Egregious means conspicuously bad or offensive, something that really takes the cake. Now, we have facetious.
When the police cornered him in an alley, Jack claimed he was only being facetious when he yelled, "This is a robbery! Shut up, give me the money, and no one gets hurt!"
Facetious means playfully humorous, and it isn't a valid legal defense, by the way. Pander is next.
When she was running for class president, Maria pandered to the cheerleaders by promising to get pom-poms made a part of the school uniform.
To pander means to cater to the lower tastes and desires of others and to exploit their weaknesses. Next and last, we have propriety.
Don was shown to have a less than refined sense of propriety when he tried to eat soup with his hands.
Propriety means appropriateness of behavior.
Isn't it about time for another one of your bonus groups?
Yes, indeed it is. This one is called I'll Be the Judge of That, and it's all about legalese mumbo-jumbo stuff.
And we aim to clarify the mumbo-jumbo, so let's start with biased.
A bias is a prejudice, so biased describes someone with any kind of bias or prejudice.
Judy was charged with bias when she gave her son perfect tens at the diving competition.
It wasn't necessarily a case of bias. Maybe he dove perfectly. Just because she was his mother.
Jack, he missed the pool. He left in an ambulance.
Oh. Great example of bias. That's pretty incontrovertible evidence.
Incontrovertible means indisputable or not open to question. I'm no expert on jurisprudence, but I think giving a perfect score to a diver who misses the pool is incontrovertible evidence of bias.
Jurisprudence is the philosophy or science of law. It's got the same root as jury or jurisdiction, so you can guess that it's got something to do with the law.
Natasha spent years as a student of jurisprudence in order to realize her dream of becoming a high-power attorney.
Despite years at law school, not to mention the endless hours and spirit-crushing workload she landed at her very first law firm, she stuck to it.
While her friends were out playing and she was poring over law books, she kept her eye on the prize.
And once the bucks started rolling in, she felt vindicated.
Vindicated means freed from blame or proven to be true. In Natasha's case, her efforts were proven to have been worth it once she realized her dream.
Just like the ant and the grasshopper. Once winter came and the grasshopper nearly starved to death, the ant felt vindicated that all of his hard work had been the right choice.
And then the grasshopper was penitent.
Meaning, of course, that the grasshopper felt remorseful for his misdeeds.
Here's a mnemonic for you. Penitent sounds a bit like penitentiary.
The big house.
Where, if all goes well, a criminal should be ever penitent for the crimes he's
or she's
committed. After being penitent for long enough, the criminal becomes reformed and is reintroduced into society.
Or more often, the criminal spends hours getting really buff and learning about legal loopholes.
Jack, time and a place for everything.
You're right. I'm sure feeling penitent about my inappropriate outburst. My emphatic slander of the criminal justice system was capricious of me, and it showed an egregious lack of propriety on my part.
Wow. I can't sanction your poor self-control, but your beautiful use of so many hit parade words certainly mitigates your crime. You're exculpated.
Thanks. Can we review the bonus group I'll Be the Judge of That now?
Sure. Give us an example of bias, would ya?
To get out of jury duty, Samantha claimed to be biased against anyone with more than 2 letters in their last name.
Biased means prejudiced. Next is incontrovertible.
The feathers sticking out of Fluffy's mouth were incontrovertible evidence that she had disposed of Polly.
Incontrovertible means indisputable or not open to question. Next up is jurisprudence.
Not familiar with terms of jurisprudence, Nathan assumed that habeas corpus was a Roman statesman.
Jurisprudence is the philosophy or science of law. Vindicated is our next hit parader.
The butler was vindicated when the gardener, the cook, and the chauffeur all confessed to the murder.
Vindicated means freed from blame or proven to be truthful. Last is penitent.
Because he giggled when he begged the court's forgiveness, no one believed that Carl was truly penitent.
Penitent means expressing remorse for one's misdeeds.
Unless you believe that Carl was just nervous. I giggle when I get nervous.
That's a possible interpretation that may exculpate him and prove that he was penitent, but luckily we can't argue that point.
I'll be the judge of that.
No, we really can't. We're out of time for now.
Oh, right. But there are plenty more hit parade words where these beauties came from.